we had seen that in Mendelian inheritance pattern, there was a contrast between the expression of phenotypes. Like for instance, if we are talking about the height of plant, pea plant I am saying, it was either tall or contrasting dwarf. Okay. If it was about the flower color, it was violet or totally contrasting white. So there were many characteristics, not just in the case of Mendelian crosses that we studied. Apart from that, there were phenotypes which were taken into consideration, and often the gene responsible for it was giving the contrasting character. Alright, the allele was contrasting to what was present. So in nature we had contrasting phenotypes. But there is a big but. Now what is that but? You being a student, have you ever analyzed the height of other students in your class, your classmates? If you have a look at their height, you will not find contrasting phenotypes. Instead, there would be grades which would be present in the phenotypes. So wherever there are grades which are present in the phenotypic expression, certainly it is not contrasting. Take the example of skin color. Take the example of human height. Now these are two simplest examples that you can observe. Even in your house you are going to find these two examples showing grades of phenotypes, that the phenotype can occur in grades instead of showing contrast, that either someone would be completely fair or someone would be completely dark in skin color, and the other case is completely tall or way beyond 6 feet, and the other one will be lower than 3 feet. It does not occur in certain cases, not certain, in fact all cases of human height. It shows a continuous variation. Okay. Now this is what we have to study, that how does this continuous variation which shows grades of phenotypes occurs at genetic level in terms of gene and its alleles. Now when I say that continuous variation is to be observed, we talk about polygenic inheritance. Now before we study about polygenic inheritance, we have to see that this continuous variation is occurring as a result of quantitative inheritance, where the number of alleles which are present determine the expression of phenotype. Okay, I am going to repeat it, that whatever would be the expression of phenotype, it depends on the quantity of alleles, how many alleles are present. That means number of alleles determine the expression of a particular phenotype. Now how does it happen? Firstly, it is different from the qualitative inheritance that we had studied till now, that if you get a dominant allele, you are going to have the dominant expression, and if you get pair of recessive alleles, you are going to have recessive expression, and that was what qualitative inheritance meant. Now in the case of quantitative inheritance, what you are going to see is more would be the number of alleles for a particular phenotype, or inclination would be more towards a particular phenotype, more would be the expression of that particular phenotype. Now take the example of human skin. One thing you have to keep in mind, that oftenly it is expression of polygenes. That means more than 3 genes are involved. Okay, more than 3 genes would be involved for giving the expression of phenotypes, and more would be the number of alleles. In that particular direction, the phenotype will be showing its expression. Now supposedly you take the human skin example, where albinic skin color or completely white albino skin color is expressed by recessive, completely recessive condition, and we take 3 genes for expression of this, while completely black would be represented by all dominant genes, okay, alleles for the gene A, B and C. Now if we cross these two, what we are going to see is AA, BB, CC. This would be exactly intermediate. The phenotypic expression for this particular genotype would be exactly intermediate between these two. That means intermediate skin color, or otherwise known as mulatto, would be born. Now what you have over here is that 3 are dominant, 3 alleles are dominant and 3 alleles are recessive. So you have completely intermediate coloration. Now supposedly you are asked to interbreed these offsprings. This is F1. Now what would happen in F2? What we are going to observe is that the F1 parents, when interbred, we are going to find many phenotypes, grades of phenotypes, and we have this cross. You can carry out this cross to understand it better. It is a big Punnett square. 64 squares would be formed. Why 64? Because this is a condition where the genes are present at heterozygous at 3 places. 3 loci are heterozygous. So we have 2 power 3. That is the formula for achieving what number of gametes would be formed, and it would be 8 gametes would be formed. 8 categories of gametes would be formed in each case, and 8 multiplied by 8 equals to 64. So we have a huge Punnett square that is of 64 boxes. What I am trying to tell you over here is that whatever offsprings would be formed, there is a possibility that you can get this offspring. There is a possibility you get this offspring. Now you can make it very clear that this would be 1 grade less than the completely dark parent that was in the beginning, okay. For F1 generation, the parents were capital A, capital A, capital B, capital B, capital C, capital C. That was completely homozygous condition. This was the condition for one parent and this was for the other parent. Now this is completely dark, this is completely white, this is intermediate. As you know, we get a genotype where we have 5 of the alleles which belong to the dominant category. So more is the number, more would be the inclination towards that particular phenotype. And in this case you can make it out that there are 5 recessives. So this would be more near to the genotype which is having all the recessive alleles. So this would be one shade lighter than this, and this should be the shade darker to the lightest one. So what we are going to get is that there would be a continuous variation in genotypes, and that is what we were seeking in the beginning as we started the lesson. Alright, one thing you have to keep in mind, that expression of each allele is equivalent as much as other alleles are expressing in itself. Supposedly this contributes, this contributes 1 gram of melanin. So this would also be contributing 1 gram of melanin. This is just an example I am giving you. That means the expression of each allele is equivalent irrespective of what other alleles are expressing. And as you can make it out, that it is totally quantitative. More is the number of alleles to whichever category it belongs, more would be the phenotype inclined towards that particular phenotype which the parent has. So this is about continuous variation. You can figure out what all gametes would be made. I'll just help you out and you can work out the Punnett square that would be formed, and you will get the possible genotypes that could come, and from that you can make it out how many phenotypes would be there. What all gametes would be there in this case? It would be this. 8 gametes are to be formed. Remember, you have to place 8 like this, 8 that way. You can very well make Punnett square by now. Next is capital A, capital B, small c. Third would be capital A, small b, small c. Now we'll take B into consideration. Okay, so we have over here it is A, B, C. A, B, C, capital A, capital B. Now we are going to take into consideration small a. Now small a would come with capital A, capital B, capital C. Now small a would come with capital B, small c, and this would be like this. Okay. Now we have got 3 for capital B. I'm getting a little bit confused myself. I'm getting a little bit confused. I'll help you out how you make it. It would be like this, 1. Other one would be like this. Third one would be like this. Now we put the small. Again we have this. Then we have small like this, and the next one would be like this. Now what are we left with? Any possibility, any probability you see we are left with? Let me put this small one as the last condition where all are recessive. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We need 2 more. So what is to be considered? We have 3 of small c, 4 of small c. We need to have 4 more of small b. So we are going to see capital A, small b, capital C, and small a, capital B, small c. No, we have already had it. We are going to have one more. Let me check out. Capital B, capital B, capital B. One more small b. 3 of one more small b has to be here. We need to have one more small a, and how many capital C's are there? So we need to have this capital C. So these are the 8 gametes that would be formed. 8 would be formed in the other parent. We are going to get the genotypes, okay, of the individuals that would be formed. And as you make the cross, you will find it out that more is the number of dominant phenotype, it would favor darker color. If there would be recessive allele, it would favor the lighter color. So this is what is there in this polygenic inheritance. It is seen in human height as well. So this is all you have to remember. When you figure out the Punnett square, what you're going to find that the genotype, if represented in the form of a graph, it forms a bell-shaped graph where the individuals which are having an intermediate phenotype, they are maximum in number. Those which have extreme, over here you are going to find AA. Here you are going to find, and here this is the intermediate one. So certainly you get a bell-shaped curve for the polygenic inheritance, which you have as which you have in the case of human skin color, where the intermediates have the maximum number of progeny, and this is the bell-shaped curve. This is in contrast to the qualitative inheritance, where you are not going to find bell-shaped curve. There would be 2 graphs which would be either the individuals would belong to one category or to the other category. The intermediates are not going to be as much as seen in this case. Also, one more thing is to be noticed, that the number of parentals reduce as we go further and further mixing the genotypes. the number of parental categories it reduces. If this is to increase like this, the number of parentals would increase further. So the bell-shaped curve becomes steeper and steeper, more is the number, or as we go down the generations. So this is for F2 generation. If we go for F3, it would become more steep and the parental category would decline in comparison to the intermediates. So this is all to be understood in polygenic inheritance. I hope I am clear by the end of lesson that it is the number of genes or the number of alleles for a particular gene which are responsible for showing the phenotype, which would show grades instead of contrasting features as we had seen in the earlier qualitative inheritance.